We're here today on RealAgriculture.com. We're at the Tiffin Conference in Lethbridge. Right now we're with Bob Treadway. He is from Treadway and Associates. He is known as a very enthusiastic futurist. Welcome today, Bob.
Thank you. Appreciate it, John.
Okay, Bob, you talked to the group this morning about a couple points, but I want to talk to you about your view of the future of agriculture. What do you think the future of agriculture is?
I think it is tremendously bright and very challenging, if I can use two terms. And a lot of what I spoke to the group about this morning was related to that. I gave them some instruction on how to look into the future, but also about the fact that agriculture is in, I think, the best position it's been in for the last 50 years. I think the next 50 years are going to be extraordinarily exciting, productive, and yet also challenging from the standpoint of what opposition it will face, what regulatory hurdles it will face, difficulties related to international trade, and many others.
So do you think, you talked to the group this morning, did you get a feeling from the group that they understand the opportunities and maybe how challenging it will be to kind of skate through that?
It's difficult when you're doing a presentation and the group does not want to jump to their feet and run to microphones to ask you questions to get a total feel. But one of the things I was able to do was, because I was the first presenter, I was able to circulate in the audience and talk to several of the producers and a great number of the students that were there. I think that the students understand it. That was an extraordinarily well-thought group of people who, when I would go in and ask them, hey, if there's anything you could know about agriculture 10, 15 years from now, what would it be? And their questions were good. They related to things like, are we going to be able to have good, robust international trade? What will oil prices be like at that time? How difficult will it be to run operations? What will land costs be, etc.? Those kinds of things. And I think they really have a grasp of it. The operators usually tend to be more operational and kind of tactical, and they're looking in shorter time frames. So for me, with them, what I'm trying to do is stretch their viewpoints and to get them to think outside of the farm gate, etc.
Do you think our biggest opportunity and our biggest challenge is trying to feed that projected 9 billion people by 2050?
No, I don't believe it's the biggest challenge, and that was a point I tried to make with the group, because too often I find that presenters, and there's a kind of an aggregated thought in agriculture that, oh, we're in wonderful shape because 3 billion new people are going to come on the planet and they're going to need us in order to feed them. And I say to that, really examine your assumptions, which is which was, I think, the fifth point that I made with the group. Let's face it, agriculture is going to become extraordinarily more productive over the next 20, or the next 50 years, when that population is expected to come onto this planet. As a consequence, even though the arable land per person will drop significantly between now and 2030, let's say, which I showed them, on the other hand, the developing nations of the world will get very good at agriculture. So the people that have been forecasting for a long time that China is not going to be able to feed themselves can't really explain the fact that China is a net exporter of food today. Or what's going to happen in Brazil when the roads and the canals finally get to all of that land and arable land. Or what happens when breakthroughs like molecular breeding come along that allow us to take new varieties to the field in 3 years as opposed to 20, and what that will mean for outputs, for diets, for nutrition, etc. Some things are going to be problematic, animal protein, for example. But I think all of those things are going to be out there, and what we don't tend to think about is, and we see that it's obvious that that stuff is coming, that the 3 billion people are coming, but we're going to have an awful lot more competition, and it's going to be more efficient competition, including our own ability over that period of time.
So those are some very good points on challenges. What do you see as the biggest opportunity?
Well, I think there are multiple and several. It's the ability to be able to take new thought, new methods, new technologies, and overlay them on existing operations. I gave a couple of examples. One is an organization, a company called Morgan Ranch, which is in Nebraska. It's a cattle operation that came to that part of the United States from New Mexico, where they ran out of water earlier in the 20th century. And they had a Hereford operation, they were selling their great output into the mass market. But what they realized was that in order to truly be profitable and to maintain and make their operation sustainable, what they had to have was a different approach. So they chose a new breed to mix with their Hereford herd. It was the Wagyu breed. That's the Japanese cattle that are used to produce Kobe beef in Japan. So they have that, and then they decided a different marketing regimen. In their particular case, they sell almost all of their produce, whether it's to a restaurant or consumer, via the internet. So as a consequence, they're immune from the market pressures. They've broken the chain and the necessity to go to the market, which can go through tremendous fluctuations and very deep negotiations. And as a consequence, they've created themselves not just a sustainable operation, but a really particularly profitable one. Another example I talked about was a small dairy farm down in the Bitterroot Valley of Montana, and the dairy business in the United States has been extraordinarily stressed, more so than perhaps in history over the last 2-3 years. It's not supply managed like it is here in Canada, and those fellows at the time had just erected and had put into operation an anaerobic digester that takes all of the waste stream out of their milking barn. They scrape it, they put it in a lagoon, it goes into a big anaerobic digester, which essentially has an output of 3 things. Methane gas, which they use to generate power, and to generate power that they can get carbon credits for. The solids, which they use for bedding for the animals, but also sell at a very high price per bag to local nurseries. And a liquid stream that they in turn use to grow their corn, their silage, their alfalfa, etc. Right now they're making more money on the waste stream than they are on the milk, even though markets have bounced back. And I see example after example of these new exciting technologies, methodologies, etc., that I think make the operations better, more profitable, more fun, more engrossing, and more interesting for the next generation. Let's not forget them, because they're part of this next generation to inherit and succeed to.
Well, I really appreciate you joining us today, and good luck at the Tiffin Conference, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Pleasure, Sean. Thank you.